10 foods that naturally support healthy blood pressure. For decades, doctors told patients that managing blood pressure came down to exactly two things: cut the salt, take the medication. New research suggests that belief has been incomplete the entire time. Certain ordinary foods, already sitting in kitchens across the country, appear to help blood vessels relax within hours of eating them, not weeks. And almost nobody watching this has ever been told that. This video is for general educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always speak with a qualified healthcare professional about your individual health needs before making changes to your diet or lifestyle. Blood pressure is often called a silent factor in overall health, and for good reason. It can rise quietly without pain, without warning, and without any obvious signal that something has changed inside the body. Yet what you eat day after day plays a meaningful role in supporting the systems that help keep blood pressure within a healthy range. Today, we are going to walk through 10 foods that research suggests may help support healthy blood pressure levels as part of a balanced diet. Some of these foods you probably already have in your pantry. Others might genuinely catch you off guard. And stay with us until the very end, because the 10th food on this list was tied in clinical research to one of the clearest blood pressure changes of anything we cover today, a number that surprised even the scientists who first measured it. Before we get into the list itself, it helps to understand in the simplest terms possible why food even matters here in the first place. Blood pressure is essentially a measure of how much force your blood is placing against the walls of your arteries as your heart pumps it through your body. A few key nutrients, especially potassium, magnesium, and certain plant compounds called flavonoids, appear to help support the relaxation of blood vessels and the balance of fluids in the body. When blood vessels are more relaxed and fluid balance is well supported, blood pressure tends to be easier for the body to regulate. With that foundation in place, let us begin with the first food on our list. Number 1. Bananas. Bananas often get dismissed as a basic breakfast food, something you grab on the way out the door without thinking twice about it. But this simple, inexpensive fruit happens to be one of the richest and most accessible sources of potassium available. Potassium works almost like a counterbalance to sodium in the body. When sodium levels are high, potassium may help the body manage that excess more effectively, which in turn may support healthier blood pressure levels over time. Consider the story of Robert, a retired mechanic in his early 70s who had spent decades enjoying salty snacks without much thought. After a routine checkup revealed that his blood pressure numbers were trending higher than his doctor would like, Robert was encouraged to look at his overall eating pattern rather than making one dramatic change. Small adjustments followed, and one of the simplest was replacing his afternoon bag of chips with a banana. Robert was quick to point out that this single swap was not a cure, and his doctor agreed, but it became part of a broader pattern of eating that he found easier to sustain than a complicated diet plan. His experience is a helpful reminder that supporting blood pressure is rarely about one dramatic change. It tends to be about small, repeatable habits. One medium banana contains a meaningful amount of potassium, and pairing it with a diet that already includes vegetables and whole grains may amplify the benefit. It is worth noting that people with certain kidney conditions need to be cautious with potassium intake, so this is exactly the kind of dietary change worth discussing with a healthcare provider first. There is another detail about bananas that often gets overlooked. The ripeness of the fruit can subtly influence its overall nutritional profile, and while these small differences rarely change the bigger picture, they hint at something worth remembering throughout this entire video. Precision matters far less than consistency. A banana eaten regularly, week after week, tends to matter more for long-term health than searching for the perfectly ripe piece of fruit on any single day. Number 2. Beets. Beets have quietly built a reputation among athletes and nutrition researchers alike, and the reason comes down to a compound called dietary nitrate. When you eat beets, your body converts these nitrates into nitric oxide, a molecule that may help blood vessels relax and widen. This process, sometimes called vasodilation, may support smoother blood flow and, over time, healthier blood pressure readings. What makes beets particularly interesting is how quickly researchers have observed changes after people consumed beet juice or roasted beets in scientific studies. Some studies have shown measurable changes in blood pressure within just a few hours of consumption, which is a much faster response than most dietary changes typically produce. That said, individual responses vary widely, and a single serving of beets is not a substitute for a consistent, well-rounded eating pattern. If the earthy taste of beets has kept you away in the past, roasting them with a small amount of olive oil can bring out a natural sweetness that surprises a lot of first-time beet eaters. Shredding raw beets into a salad or blending them into a smoothie are other approachable ways to work this vegetable into a weekly routine without feeling like you are forcing down something unpleasant. Interestingly, some researchers have pointed to certain mouthwashes and antibacterial mouth rinses as a possible interference with the nitrate conversion process, since specific bacteria living on the tongue play a role in transforming dietary nitrates into nitric oxide. This is a small but fascinating example of how interconnected the body truly is, where something as unrelated as oral hygiene habits may influence how effectively a vegetable delivers its potential benefits. Number 3. Leafy greens. Spinach, kale, and Swiss chard belong to a category of vegetables that nutrition experts return to again and again, and blood pressure support is one of the clearest reasons why. Leafy greens are naturally rich in potassium, and many varieties also contain nitrates similar to those found in beets. This combination may offer a kind of double support system for blood vessel health. There is also a practical reason leafy greens deserve more attention than they usually get. Unlike some foods that require very specific preparation to unlock their benefits, leafy greens are remarkably flexible. They can be added to soups, blended into smoothies, sautéed as a simple side dish, or used as the base of a salad. This flexibility makes them easier to eat consistently, and consistency is often more important than any single perfect meal. Consider Diane, a schoolteacher in her 60s who found the idea of eating enough vegetables overwhelming until she started adding a handful of spinach to her morning eggs. It took her only a few extra seconds each morning, and she later described it as one of the easiest habits she had ever built into her routine. Her physician was careful to emphasize that this change worked alongside her prescribed treatment plan rather than replacing it, which is an important distinction to keep in mind throughout this entire video. What struck Diane most, she later said, was how little effort the change actually required once it became routine. She had originally assumed that eating more vegetables would mean elaborate meal preparation or complicated recipes, but the reality turned out to be far simpler. This is a pattern worth paying attention to as we move through the rest of this list. Many of the most supportive foods for blood pressure are not exotic or expensive. They are ordinary items that simply need to be invited back into the daily rotation more often. Number 4. Oats. Oats might seem like an unusual entry on a list focused on blood pressure, since most people associate them primarily with cholesterol support. However, oats contain a soluble fiber called beta-glucan, and emerging research suggests that fiber intake in general may play a supporting role in healthy blood pressure regulation. The mechanism appears to be connected to how fiber affects the gut, inflammation levels, and even the balance of certain hormones involved in blood pressure control. What makes oats particularly appealing as a daily habit is how simple they are to prepare, and how well they pair with other blood pressure-friendly foods already on this list. A bowl of oatmeal topped with sliced banana and a few berries essentially combines 3 supportive foods into a single breakfast, all without requiring specialized cooking skills or expensive ingredients. It is worth being mindful of added sugars and flavored oatmeal packets, which can sometimes undercut the benefits of the oats themselves. Choosing plain oats and adding your own toppings gives you more control over what actually ends up in the bowl. Steel-cut oats and old-fashioned rolled oats tend to retain more of their fiber structure compared to instant varieties, which are often processed more heavily. This does not mean instant oats have no value, but for anyone specifically hoping to maximize the fiber-related benefits discussed here, the less processed varieties are generally considered the stronger choice. Number 5. Berries. Blueberries, strawberries, and raspberries are often praised for their antioxidant content, but their connection to blood pressure deserves just as much attention. Berries are rich in compounds called flavonoids, particularly a group known as anthocyanins, which are responsible for the deep red, blue, and purple colors in these fruits. Some research has suggested that regular berry consumption may be associated with modest improvements in blood pressure readings over time, possibly due to how these flavonoids interact with blood vessel function. There is something almost poetic about the idea that the very pigment giving berries their vibrant color might also be linked to the compounds supporting cardiovascular health. It is a reminder that nature often bundles nutrition and appearance together in ways that are easy to overlook. Frozen berries offer a practical, budget-friendly alternative to fresh ones, especially outside of peak growing season, and research suggests the nutritional value remains largely intact through the freezing process. A small bowl of mixed berries, whether fresh or frozen, can be an easy addition to breakfast, a midday snack, or even a light dessert. One large-scale observational study, following tens of thousands of participants over several years, found that those who reported eating berries several times a week tended to show a modestly lower risk of developing high blood pressure compared to those who rarely ate them. Observational studies like this one cannot prove cause and effect on their own, but they add another piece to a growing body of evidence pointing in a consistent direction. Number 6. Fatty fish. Salmon, mackerel, and sardines belong to a category of fish rich in omega-3 fatty acids, a type of fat that has been studied extensively for its potential role in cardiovascular health. Omega-3 fatty acids may help reduce inflammation in blood vessels and support their ability to relax, which in turn may be associated with healthier blood pressure levels. Fatty fish also offers a practical advantage that some other foods on this list do not. It can serve as a satisfying main course rather than a side dish or snack, which makes it easier to build an entire meal around. Grilled salmon with a side of leafy greens, for example, combines two supportive foods into one sitting without requiring much additional planning. For those who do not eat fish for personal, ethical, or availability reasons, algae-based omega-3 supplements exist as an alternative source, though this is a conversation worth having directly with a healthcare provider rather than a decision made from a video alone. Preparation method matters here as well. Baking, grilling, or steaming fish tends to preserve more of its beneficial fats compared to deep frying, which can introduce less favorable oils into the meal and offset some of the potential benefit. A simple squeeze of lemon and a few herbs are often all that a piece of salmon or mackerel really needs. Number 7. Garlic. Garlic has held a place in traditional food and folk remedies for centuries, long before modern science began investigating why. Researchers have identified a compound called allicin, released when garlic is crushed or chopped, as a possible contributor to healthy blood vessel function. Some studies have suggested that garlic supplementation may be associated with modest reductions in blood pressure, particularly in individuals whose levels are already elevated. There is a practical detail worth mentioning here for anyone hoping to get the most out of garlic. Allowing crushed or chopped garlic to sit for several minutes before cooking may help preserve more of its beneficial compounds, since the enzymatic reaction that produces allicin takes a short amount of time to fully develop. This is a small technique, but it is the kind of detail that rarely makes it into everyday cooking advice. Garlic also has the advantage of being something most people already enjoy, which means encouraging more of it in your diet is rarely a hard sell. Roasted garlic spread over whole grain bread, minced garlic in a stir-fry, or a few extra cloves in a homemade tomato sauce are all easy ways to increase intake without it feeling like a chore. Some research has specifically examined aged garlic extract as a concentrated form of these beneficial compounds, and a handful of clinical trials have reported meaningful blood pressure improvements among participants using it alongside their standard treatment. It is important to note that supplements are not regulated in the same way as prescription medications, and anyone considering garlic supplements, rather than garlic as a food, should discuss this specifically with their doctor first, particularly if they are taking blood-thinning medication. Number 8. Pistachios. Pistachios stand out among nuts for a combination of reasons that make them particularly relevant to this topic. They are a good source of potassium, magnesium, and healthy unsaturated fats, and several studies have specifically examined pistachios in relation to blood pressure response, especially during periods of mental or physical stress. Some research has suggested that regular pistachio consumption may be associated with a more controlled blood pressure response under stressful conditions compared to other snack choices. This is a particularly interesting finding because stress itself is well known to cause temporary spikes in blood pressure. A snack that may help support a more measured response during those moments adds a layer of practical value beyond its everyday nutritional profile. Portion size matters here since nuts are calorie-dense. A small handful, roughly the amount that fits in the palm of one hand, is generally considered a reasonable serving. Choosing unsalted or lightly salted varieties helps ensure that the sodium content does not work against the very goal you are trying to support. James, a software engineer in his 50s who described his job as constantly stressful, started keeping a small container of unsalted pistachios at his desk after reading about the research connecting them to blood pressure response under stress. He was careful to say that his job did not become any less demanding, but he appreciated having a snack he felt genuinely good about reaching for during a tense afternoon, rather than something that left him feeling worse afterward. Number 9. Yogurts. Plain yogurt, particularly varieties containing live active cultures, has been linked in some research to modest improvements in blood pressure readings. Yogurt provides calcium, and in fermented varieties, certain probiotic compounds that may influence gut health in ways connected to cardiovascular function. Researchers are still working to fully understand the relationship between gut bacteria and blood pressure regulation, but early findings have been promising enough to keep this area of study active and growing. Margaret, a retired librarian in her late 60s, described switching from flavored, sugar-heavy yogurt to plain yogurt with fresh berries as one of the easiest changes she made after a conversation with her doctor about her blood pressure readings. She was careful to note that this change alone was not responsible for her improved numbers, but she felt it fit naturally alongside the walking routine and medication adjustments her doctor recommended. Her story illustrates a theme that comes up again and again in this kind of research. Food is rarely the entire answer, but it is very often a meaningful part of a larger picture. Choosing plain yogurt over flavored varieties allows you to control the added sugar content yourself, and pairing it with berries, as mentioned earlier in this video, may offer a combined benefit worth considering. Greek yogurt, in particular, tends to offer a higher protein content compared to traditional yogurt, which some people find helps them feel satisfied for longer between meals. This is a secondary benefit rather than a direct blood pressure mechanism, but it illustrates an important theme running through this entire video. Many of these foods support overall health in more than one way at once, and blood pressure is simply one piece of a much larger picture. Number 10. Dark chocolates. Here is the food we mentioned earlier, the one with a genuinely compelling research story behind it. Dark chocolate, particularly varieties with a high percentage of cacao, contains flavonoids, plant compounds that have been studied for their potential role in supporting healthy blood vessel function. Some research has suggested that regular, moderate consumption of dark chocolate with high flavonol content may be associated with small improvements in blood pressure readings over time. One clinical review examined multiple studies on flavonol-rich cocoa products and found a consistent pattern. Across several trials, participants who consumed flavonol-rich dark chocolate showed modest reductions in blood pressure compared to those who did not, with some analyses reporting average systolic reductions in the range of 2 to 3 points. That might sound small on its own, but across an entire population, even modest average reductions in blood pressure have been associated with meaningful differences in cardiovascular outcomes over time. This is the statistic worth remembering from this entire video, because it captures something important. Meaningful health support does not always come from dramatic interventions. Sometimes it comes from small, well-supported habits practiced consistently over months and years. It is worth being clear that not all chocolate qualifies here. Milk chocolate and many mass-produced chocolate products contain high amounts of added sugar and lower cacao content, which may offset any potential benefit. Dark chocolate with 70% cacao or higher, consumed in small amounts such as 1 or 2 small squares a few times a week, is generally the form referenced in the research supporting this food. Frank, a retired postal worker in his early 70s, had always assumed that anything called chocolate had no place in a heart-healthy diet. When his cardiologist mentioned the research on high cacao dark chocolate during a routine visit, Frank was skeptical at first, joking that it sounded like an excuse to eat dessert. His doctor was quick to clarify that this was never framed as permission to eat chocolate freely, but rather one small, evidence-supported piece of a much larger dietary pattern that already included vegetables, whole grains, and regular physical activity. Frank's experience captures something worth holding onto as we close out this list. None of these 10 foods work as a shortcut, and none of them replace the broader habits that genuinely protect long-term health. As we bring this list to a close, it is worth stepping back and looking at the bigger picture these 10 foods paint together. Bananas and leafy greens bring potassium. Beets and leafy greens bring nitrates. Berries, garlic, and dark chocolate bring flavonoids and related plant compounds. Oats bring fiber. Fatty fish brings omega-3 fatty acids. Pistachios bring a unique combination of minerals and healthy fats. Yogurt brings calcium and probiotic support. None of these foods work in isolation, and none of them are a substitute for the guidance of a healthcare professional, especially for anyone currently managing high blood pressure or taking medication for it. What they represent instead is a pattern, a way of eating that over time may help support the systems in your body responsible for keeping blood pressure in a healthy range. It is also worth acknowledging that no single food, no matter how well researched, operates as a stand-alone solution. Blood pressure is influenced by a wide range of factors, including physical activity, sleep quality, stress levels, genetics, and overall body weight, alongside diet. The 10 foods covered in this video are best understood as supportive additions within a broader lifestyle, not replacements for medical treatment or a substitute for regular checkups with a healthcare provider. Anyone currently managing elevated blood pressure should continue following their prescribed treatment plan and speak with their doctor before making significant dietary changes, especially if they are taking medication that could interact with certain nutrients, such as potassium or vitamin K. Throughout this video, a consistent theme has emerged again and again. Robert, Diane, Margaret, James, and Frank each made small, manageable changes rather than overhauling their entire diet overnight. None of their stories involved dramatic transformations or rigid meal plans. Instead, they described gradual, sustainable adjustments that fit naturally into lives already full of work, family, and everyday responsibilities. This is perhaps the most practical takeaway from everything we have covered today. Supporting healthy blood pressure through diet does not require perfection. It simply asks for consistency, patience, and a willingness to make small, informed choices more often than not. If there is one number worth carrying with you from this entire video, let it be this one. In research on flavanol-rich dark chocolate, average systolic blood pressure reductions in the range of 2 to 3 points were observed across multiple studies. A modest but meaningful reminder that small, consistent choices can add up in ways that matter. Before you go, we would love to hear from you. Which of these 10 foods are already part of your routine, and which one are you most curious to try this week? Leave a comment and let us know, because your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If you found this video helpful, sharing it with a friend or family member who might benefit is one of the simplest ways to support the work we do here. And if you would like to see more videos like this one, consider subscribing so you never miss the next piece of health information we put together for you. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.